What's up, everybody? How's it going? Nice to see you. Nice to hear from you. All that stuff. Okay. So on one of my, I think it was one of the posts that I put on the community tabs, asked some people what they'd want to see. And somebody said, I'd love to see you do a ranking of your favorite comedians. And it's funny that right after that, I saw Hal Rudnick had posted something on Twitter about Rushmore of stand-up comedians. And I posted the 4 that I would put in my own personal ones, you know. And then I started thinking, what if I split the difference and do like a top 5 of my favorite comedians of all time? And I'll get into that, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But by the way, if you're not knowing what this channel is, you've never been here before, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, hit that bell, do all that stuff. It's very, very important. It helps me out tremendously. And you get to see more of these videos. Thank you so much. Now, there's a lot of comedians that are out there right now. Obviously, friends like friends that I have, Mark Ellis, Steve Simones, Eliza Schlesinger, all comedians that I think are really great and friends of mine that if you don't know, you should check them out for sure. And then there's some people that I think are some of the greats. And one of the people I actually put in the greats that actually also puts in it falls in line with that conversation there that I think is very underrated is Rick Ingraham. Rick Ingraham is a comedian that he's a friend of mine, but he's been around for a while. And he is actually opening for Chris Rock at the moment. His new album just came out. He's hilarious. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I do think he's one of the best comedians I've ever met, ever. For what the ability, he works the crowd the entire time, but it's like this new material that he comes up with. And he's just, his magic is what his brain is. So check out Rick Ingraham if you haven't. Sebastian Maniscalco is someone that came close to making my list. Another guy that I just kind of watching, kind of coming up. And seeing all the stuff that he did, he's just absolutely incredible. Seinfeld. Andrew Dice Clay is someone that when I was younger and watching him to see, he was kind of one of the first big rock stars of comedy. Sarah Silverman. So many people. Kind of Eddie Murphy, obviously. Chris Rock. Didn't make my list, but with so many comedians out there, there's some that I'm missing that deserve honorable mentions that I'm not going to get to because that's not what this list is. This list is my top 5. And again, this is my top 5. You have a very subjective list because you respond to jokes a different way than I do. This ain't your list. This is my list. These are the top 5 people. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you why I like them, what I think is so special about them, and then an album that they have that I also wanted to let people know about. So, okay. So here's the first one. Coming in at number 5 for me is the great Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle has done so many great things, and you're going to see kind of an ongoing theme about the stuff that I'm talking about here. It's like it's a raw honesty of kind of who you are and what you do with kind of no fear, right? And that's the thing with Dave Chappelle, and he's been public with his struggles and the things that he went through, and he was at Comedy Central and how he took time off and all the money that he could have made and all that. And then there's the public stuff that happened afterwards. But there's something so special about what he does on stage that there are very few comedians that can do this, that can just be the same person that they are in a room and be on stage and craft it inside of a joke. And a lot of people don't understand that because a lot of people, when they're doing comedy, put on what I call comedy voice. And it's like you become this persona that works for a lot of people. And Dave Chappelle is just that kind of perfect comedian. Like a few of the people in my list, at least one of them definitely has a comedy voice, but in a different way. But Dave Chappelle is so raw and so honest and very controversial, as we know. But there's something that he's able to do also. He's also another guy that I remember at the Comedy Store or these other places that he'd come into, and he would come in and he would just do 2 hours because it's like almost like a podcast for him when he's doing stand-up comedy, but he's natural. And there are very funny comedians who aren't naturally funny in life. Most comedians that I know are not naturally those types of people who are just cracking the jokes. They're kind of subdued. Like I've hung out with Sebastian many times. He's not the biggest, loudest guy in the room. He's quiet and he's just kind of like moving around. But when you get him on stage, he's, oh my God, what is going on? He's huge, and that's where he comes alive. And a lot of comedians are like that. Hell, I was definitely like that a lot of times. I think the stupid microphone that I'm talking into now gets me to a place where I can be a little bit more me. But I was very kind of subdued at times and not knowing what to do and awkward and like on a stage. And it's just like that freedom thing. But Dave Chappelle is seems to be where he is on stage. He can do it, and he seems obviously quiet and stuff when he's, I guess, in an area. But I don't know, inside of that room, when you're in a room with him, same stuff he's saying in that room he can say on stage, and he can kind of come up with it and just kind of work it on stage. I think he's brilliant. So he's had many specials, but the one for me that not too long ago, Sticks and Stones, and again, it's a controversial one. We know that with Netflix and everything that came out. It was just that pure raw honesty, and it was the first kind of Netflix special that came out in 2020, and it's fantastic. It's a really good dive into what Dave Chappelle, how he works as a comedian and how his mind works. So if you haven't seen it, you should check that one out for sure. All right. So then that's number 5. So number 5 for me, and number 4 would be the one and the only, the late great Bill Hicks. Now, a lot of people don't know Bill Hicks. I remember when I was talking on Big Thing recently, I was talking about Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks died young. I think he was like 27 or something, maybe a little older, maybe 30. But he was young. He was young when he died, and he died of cancer. So Bill Hicks, as I was just saying before, very honest, very raw, very ahead of his time. Lenny Bruce is like the first comedian that really pushed the limits of what you can say and what you couldn't say on stage. And then there were other comedians after him, but he used to get arrested for things that you wouldn't even get 3 hits on YouTube now if you said. But back then, there were certain things you couldn't say, and Lenny Bruce said them all. Bill Hicks was that type of guy. Bill Hicks was raw and honest and would go into many different topics and would attack. One of the things that I really liked, I remember listening to him just on, I can't even imagine how he would be in today with everybody, the way everybody gets offended so quick. But like he used to talk about how people would get offended at certain things he would say, and he's just like, I get offended by everything, but I just go about my day and I do other stuff. And he was just, first time I saw him was on Dangerfield's special, and he, very funny, very goofy at times, able to coordinate both characters with actually something to say. And that was the thing, is Bill Hicks had something to say. Dave Chappelle has something to say, and Bill Hicks really had something to say. And I just couldn't even imagine what else he would have said had he lived longer with the way that I think he passed in like 92 or 93, and all the way that with the way that the world has gone. And since then, I would have loved to seen Bill Hicks, and I would have loved to meet Bill Hicks. So Bill Hicks, Dangerous is the album that I would recommend to you guys. Check him out, Bill Hicks, or check him out on that Dangerfield special also. But Bill Hicks, Dangerous is the one that I recommend for you guys. I love Bill Hicks, man. He was really, really something special. All right, so that was number 4. So then coming in at number 3, the late, great Robin Williams. It's only one living person, I think, on this list, by the way. The late, great Robin Williams. Now, Robin Williams, I do believe, did use comedy voice. Did very much so. And was an amazing actor, went to Juilliard, was troubled, was plagued by substance abuse when he was coming up, and a lot of things that he did, got his life back on track after the Jim Belushi stuff happened. And but there was a energy that Robin Williams had that cannot be matched. And as I was mentioning with Rick Ingraham, Robin Williams had the ability, even though a lot of times, sometimes the things would be planned out, but he could maneuver stuff, and he could plan stuff, and he could improv stuff, and he could come up with a character and a voice, and it's from his acting background and things that he could do. But his character and his energy and his just overall, there was a certain kind of electric vibe to him where you just saw greatness. And the young stuff that he did, and I remember I saw him at the Comedy Store, actually, in like 2003. I was there. I was performing, and he came in for like 2 nights. It might have been 3, but I think it was 2 nights. And he was in the main room, and he refused to use a microphone. He didn't use the microphone the whole time. Just and he did, and there was a couple times that from his younger sets that he did that as well. And there's watch some of Robin Williams' younger stuff that he did, like when he first coming up, like coked out of his mind, but hilarious. The stuff that he would do and the way that he would kind of go back and forth within characters, but same thing could be political. Would talk about certain things that he was seeing. And he was always just on point. And the stuff that he would do with Billy Crystal and I remember when they were after he passed, Billy Crystal and Whoopi Goldberg talked about how you just never know where he was going to go, but you're always on board with it. It was never like a fearful thing. You just knew you were going to be on a ride. Just go on the ride with him. Wherever he went, you went with him. And because he just had that kind of, it was never, obviously there was a lot of negative things going on with him in his life, but when he was performing, when he was acting, I mean, he became an Oscar-winning actor and these things that he did. And it's funny, though, when you look at Robin Williams and you think about all the stuff that Robin Williams did in his acting career, right? When you look at the stuff like Jumanji and Hook and all that stuff, and even Good Morning Vietnam, which I think is a version of Robin Williams, like the performer. I think the most real Robin Williams that you ever got was in Good Will Hunting. To me, that seemed like the most real Robin Williams of who the man really was. Again, I never met him. Well, that's not true. I guess I met him briefly when he did that set in the back by the bar. It was very brief, and it was a moment that I'll never actually. I almost forgot it just now, but a moment that I should never forget. It was just I was in awe of him. I was in awe of the way that he was able to move and use that energy and his physical comedy, but also the references he would use and the characters he would use. He was incredible. My favorite album by him is actually from 1986, I think. It's Robin Williams, The Night at the Met. And I remember, what was the one that he did? It was my buddy Brian Cascio, again, another person who's passed. Robin Williams, he did a thing on Ronald Reagan. He talked about Ronald Reagan was losing. It's everybody believe me now. And I just remember always quoting that. He says that, and he talks about his young son at the time. It's like, fuck it. It's a great album. I could quote it over and over and over again. It's if you have never seen Robin Williams Tonight at the Met, I'm sure it's on YouTube. Check it out. It's pretty fantastic. So you're probably gonna be able to guess who 2 and 1 are, because they're always mentioned in the categories of anybody when you ask them greatest comedians. If they're not, then I don't really think it's people who study stand-up comedy too much, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, again, that's pretty judgmental, but that's and as I said at the beginning, that's subjective. They might not feel it, but I think it's the 2 greatest comedians, I think, of all time. That's Robin at number 3. But coming in at number 2 is the great Richard Pryor. I'm not going to argue with anyone that puts Richard Pryor at number 1. He is, as I talked about with Dave Chappelle, there is no one that was more raw and more honest than Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor would take all of his darkness and all of the things that was going on in his life that people would be ashamed of, in anything that you're ashamed of in your life that you don't ever want to talk about, Richard Pryor talked about it on stage and made it hilarious. Richard Pryor would go after anything and talk about anything and make it funny, whether it was sex, race, whatever it was. Richard Pryor could do it. His drug use and anything. He almost died like 3 or 4 times. He talked about it. Most people would feel awkward in a room. Richard Pryor made you laugh your fucking ass off about it. Another guy that became a very successful actor, and the way he was able to go in and out of characters. Mudbone being one of his characters that he did, and he was just, you couldn't. There are greats in everything, whether it's Michael Jordan in basketball, Babe Ruth in baseball. Richard Pryor is one of the greats in stand-up comedy, and just it was the ability to be able to do to not to, and again, as I mentioned to you before with Lenny Bruce, Richard Pryor is one of those guys that just like, oh, Richard, you got to try to, it's the 70s, you got to try to calm it down a little bit. Fuck you. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about drugs. I'm going to talk about fucking. I'm going to talk about race. I'm going to talk about this. I mean, he just talked about everything. And you went to a Richard Pryor concert knowing, whoa, what the hell's he going to say now? Because it could be anything. And he was just, he was fantastic. And like, it's funny because a lot of the top guys that I'm talking about, I think Bill Hicks was more a heavy smoker. I don't think he was really a drinker, but I might be wrong, but he was a heavy smoker and he got a cancer. Chappelle certainly has his issues. Robin Williams had his issues, was substance for sure. Heavy substance on Richard Pryor. And then my number one had heavy substance as well, but kind of toned it down a bit. But Richard Pryor was just an absolute legend. And so the one that I would recommend for you guys, if you've never seen it before, is oops, not that one. I just gave you away. I just gave it away. What the hell? That's not. You son of a bitch. I did it wrong. I just gave away number one. But anyway, Richard Pryor, Live on the Sunset Strip. That's the one. Live on the Sunset Strip. It's a great album, and it's so funny. It's you look at the back, you can see Annie in the background there too. But it's everything that I just mentioned to you. It's everything that I just mentioned with the honesty, the characters, the energy. It's all there. If you've never seen it before, go and check it out. And then I just gave away number one, and I might as well show you anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, coming in at number one, my all-time GOAT, George Carlin. He was my guru. He was everything I wanted to be in a stand-up comedian. From the way that he would express himself in words and the way he'd play on words, his ability to be goofy, his ability to... His writing was just exquisite. And when you looked at what he did and where he started from, he started as one of these normal, like... So, again, after Lenny Bruce came, and you would watch these Ed Sullivan performances and all these comedians that came out, it was just the normal yuck jokes, wear a suit, do the thing. And George Carlin came out in a suit, and he was telling weather jokes and the hippie weatherman or whatever he was doing, and he was just not being true to what he wanted to do. And one day he said, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And I think he was pretty much inspired by Lenny Bruce and started to do exactly what I was talking about with the rest of these comedians, and started to become instrumental in the changing of comedy. And there were words that you couldn't say on television, and George would say them. And so much so it caused like a big lawsuit and court cases and all this stuff. And George's dirty words and the things that he could say, it changed. I think it changed radio. I think it changed TV. It changed a lot. I mean, there's one point you couldn't say fart on TV, for goodness. I remember him talking about it. But I always quote George Carlin, and I've said it many times. You've been following me over at Collider Live. Back in the day, people argue with me all the time, but I always quote George Carlin on this. Anything can be funny. Anything. Not everyone can make it funny. It's true. Now, that's the trick. George Carlin found a way to make almost anything funny. Now, whether or not you thought the thing was funny, and that's another subjective thing, is that even though someone might say something that is so taboo, like let's say somebody started making jokes about Russia and Ukraine right now, right? And depending on what the joke itself was, you might sit there and laugh at it and go, oh, that was pretty funny. Wrong, but funny. And some people just are just like, no. You shouldn't, I'm not even going to judge if it's funny or not, because you shouldn't be talking about it. You're never going to change that. George Carlin went after all that stuff, did all that stuff. And it's funny because I really liked a lot of his stuff that he would talk about, like play on words. My favorite, as I was just showing you before, my favorite album from him is actually, this is his collection, but you'll see a bunch of them. He had a ton of HBO specials. My favorite is Carlin at Carnegie. It's the first one I ever really saw. I mentioned Brian Cascio before, my buddy. He's the one who showed me George growing up as a kid. And that's when I really became in awe of him. I'd never heard that kind of language before when I was that young. But I also felt he was so silly, and the things that he would say and the faces that he would make. And I related to him. I related to him when I was on stage. I related to him in the way that, like, I do stupid things like him. And not that it was like, oh, you're trying to be like, no, it was just things. See, he's a New York guy also, and I think he was from Brooklyn, I think. I know he's from New York. But there were just things that I remember he would do. One time he was like, what's that? Who's that? Is that me? I'm not sure. Sometimes I do this, and then I stop. And I find myself, if you watch Big Thing, you see me do that kind of shit all the time. And it's just stuff that, like, comes into my head. I say it out loud. And that was George. And he would kind of think, and he would be goofy enough and be silly enough to say it out there and do it. And then he would just do, so he does this whole, I can't remember where it was from, but this bit that he would do from Airplane. He talked about, here's a bunch of things that I cannot stand. Please check around your immediate seating area for personal belongings you might have brought on board. Well, let's start with personal seating area. Seat. It's a goddamn seat. Check around your seat for any personal items you might have brought on board. Personal items? These people thought I would have been a public park from the pool. And he goes, you listen to the whole thing, and it's really funny. I haven't listened to the whole bit in a while, so I just kind of butchered it. But anyway, Georgie was the best. I got a chance to see him like 4 months before he passed. I think I have the ticket on my wall up there. I do. So that's my list. That's my top 5. Got Chappelle at number 5. Got Hicks at 4. Williams at 3. Pryor at 2. Carlin at 1. What's your list? That's what I want to see. I want to see your list in the comment section. That's going to help. Comment, do all that, get it out there. Have a weekend to watch this. What do you think of my new thumbnails? I've been working on those too. I hope you like them. And by the way, subscribe to this, will you? Hit the notification button, all of that. And then make sure you hit the bell and everything else. All right. I appreciate you. Talk to you next time. Have a great weekend. Peace.